There is a diamond sitting in Washington, D.C. tonight. Blue. Flawless. 45 carats. The most famous gemstone on earth. The man who first stole it from a Hindu temple was ripped apart by wild dogs. The king who wore it died of gangrene, his leg rotting black, while the most powerful man in Europe lay screaming in his royal bed. The queen who wore it lost her head to a guillotine in front of a cheering crowd. The American heiress who bought it watched her son die at 9 years old, her daughter die of an overdose, and her husband descend into madness in a psychiatric ward, before dying completely broke herself. And the ordinary mailman who simply delivered it to the Smithsonian had his leg crushed, lost his wife, and watched his house burn to the ground. He just delivered a package. 350 years, 4 continents, dead kings, beheaded queens, ruined millionaires, and one mailman who never asked for any of it. This is the curse of the Hope Diamond. And every single word of it is documented history. Every curse has a beginning. This one begins in a temple. 17th century India, the Golconda region of what is now the state of Telangana, the source of the world's most extraordinary diamonds for centuries. The Koh-i-Noor came from these mines. The Regent diamond came from these mines. And from these same ancient deposits came a massive blue stone, roughly 112 carats in its natural rough form. So rare and so extraordinary in its deep indigo color that it was considered divine. It was set into the eye, or the forehead, accounts differ, of a sacred idol in a Hindu temple. Whether the deity was Rama, Sita, or the goddess of the moon depends on which historical record you follow. What all the accounts agree on is this: the stone was worshipped. It was sacred. It was not meant to leave. In 1653, a French gem merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier made it leave. Tavernier was extraordinary by any measure. A man who made 6 overland journeys between France and India at a time when such journeys routinely killed everyone who attempted them. He was brilliant, fearless, and completely without reverence for things that were not his. He acquired the blue stone, through purchase, theft, or some combination of both, and carried it back to France. He sold it to King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, for a price that made him one of the wealthiest private citizens in Europe. He retired to a comfortable estate in Switzerland. Then, at 84 years old, he traveled to Russia on a business venture. He was attacked by wild dogs and killed, torn apart, at 84, on a business trip he didn't need to take. King Louis XIV received the stone and immediately understood he was holding something unlike anything in any royal collection in the world. He had it recut by his court jeweler from 112 carats to 67 carats, a shape that maximized its extraordinary blue color, and set it into a ceremonial pendant he wore for royal occasions. He called it the French blue. Louis XIV wore it. He did not immediately suffer, at least not visibly. He reigned for 72 years, the longest reign in recorded European history. But he died as the curse would always collect. Not quickly, not cleanly. He died of gangrene, his leg blackening and rotting over weeks, while courtiers stood around him, performing the rituals of royal attendance, and the smell of decay filled the palace of Versailles. The most powerful man in Europe, helpless, in agony, consumed from the inside. His great-grandson Louis XVI inherited the stone and the throne, and the catastrophic debt that the French monarchy had accumulated across 2 centuries of spectacular living. He was a decent man, probably, in a situation that no decent man could survive. He wore the French blue. This Queen Marie Antoinette wore it, to the balls, to the banquets, to the ceremonies of the most glittering court in Europe, while outside the palace gates, France was starving. The revolution came in 1789. The people had decided, with the guillotine's cold logic, that kings and queens were not a feature of the future they intended to build. Louis XVI was arrested, tried, and executed on January 21, 1793. The blade dropped. The crowd roared. Marie Antoinette followed him on October 16, 1793. She climbed the scaffold in a white dress. She accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and said reportedly, "Pardon me, sir, I did not mean to do it." Her last words were an apology to the man about to kill her. That is the detail that history has never let go of, and rightly so. The French blue was among the crown jewels stolen from the royal storehouse in September 1792, during the chaos that preceded the executions. It vanished entirely. For 20 years, the most valuable colored diamond in the world simply ceased to exist in any documented record. And then it reappeared in London. Recut, smaller, transformed, but unmistakably the same stone, traced through its unique crystalline characteristics by gemologists who knew what they were looking for. The French blue had become something new. It had become the Hope Diamond. In 1839, a catalogue of the gem collection belonging to a wealthy London banking family named Hope listed a remarkable blue diamond, 45.52 carats, extraordinary quality, almost certainly the recut remnant of the stolen French blue. The stone took their name, the Hope Diamond. The Hope family's experience with the stone was instructive. The diamond passed through generations of the family before landing with Henry Francis Hope, who spent years in legal battles with his siblings over the inheritance, eventually won the right to the stone, and then gambled and overspent his way into deep debt, eventually forced to sell the diamond to pay his creditors. From London, the stone moved through European hands with a consistency of destruction that reads like a dark comedy if you are not the person being destroyed. A Russian prince named Ivan Kanatovsky gave the diamond to his mistress, a French actress, on a Monday. By Wednesday, he had shot her dead while she was wearing it. Within days, he himself was stabbed to death by Russian revolutionaries. A Greek gem merchant named Simon Monthorides acquired the stone and drove his carriage off a cliff, killing himself, his wife, and his child. A Turkish sultan named Abdul Hamid II purchased the stone, gave it to one of his wives, then shot her. He was deposed by revolution shortly after. Each owner, each tragedy, each time the stone moved on, clean and blue and indifferent, to the next person who wanted it badly enough to pay for it. That person, in 1911, was an American. Evelyn Walsh McLean was not the kind of woman who was afraid of things. She was the daughter of an Irish immigrant named Tom Walsh, who had scratched and struggled across the American West before striking one of the richest gold deposits in Colorado history. She grew up watching poverty transform overnight into wealth, and took from that experience a particular lesson. The rules that applied to ordinary people did not necessarily apply to her. By 1911, she was married to Edward Ned McLean, heir to the Washington Post and the Cincinnati Enquirer, and together they were one of the most prominent couples in Washington, D.C., hosting senators, hosting presidents, throwing parties at their estate, friendship that became legendary for their scale and extravagance. When Paris jeweler Pierre Cartier offered her the Hope Diamond, he laid out its full history of destruction with the practiced drama of a man who understood his clientele precisely. The curse, in Cartier's telling, was not a warning. It was a selling point. It was what made this stone different from every other stone in the world. Evelyn Walsh McLean paid $180,000, approximately $6 million in today's money. She had a Catholic priest bless the diamond. She laughed at the legend. She wore it everywhere, to White House dinners, to charity galas, around the neck of her Great Dane on occasion, and once, memorably, around the neck of her infant son. That son was Vincent Walsh McLean. In 1919, 8 years after his mother purchased the Hope Diamond, 9-year-old Vincent was struck by an automobile outside the family estate and killed. Evelyn did not give up the diamond. Her daughter, also named Evelyn, fought addiction throughout her young life in the private, silent way that wealthy families fight these battles, behind closed doors, with the best doctors money could buy, with the desperate hope that enough resources could outrun enough despair. She died of a drug overdose at 25. Her husband Ned McLean's drinking became catastrophic. His behavior became erratic, then bizarre, then impossible to manage. He was eventually committed to a psychiatric institution. He died there in 1941. The Washington Post, the paper that would one day become one of the most important journalistic institutions in America, the paper that would break Watergate, was sold during the family's financial collapse. Evelyn Walsh McLean, who had bought the Hope Diamond for $180,000, died in 1947, owing more than she owned. She wore the diamond until the end, defiant, diminished, still wearing the blue stone that had taken everything from her, except the defiance itself. Her estate sold the diamond to pay her debts. It passed to Harry Winston, the legendary New York jeweler, who held it for a decade before making the decision that would add the story's most unexpected chapter. In 1958, Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution. He wanted it to be seen by everyone, not locked in a private vault. He sent it by registered mail. The postal worker who delivered it was named James Todd. He was an ordinary man, a career postal worker doing his route on an ordinary day, carrying a package he could not have guessed would become the most famous delivery in American postal history. Shortly after delivering the package, James Todd's leg was crushed in a truck accident. Then his wife died. Then he suffered a separate head injury. Then his house burned down. He had not bought the diamond. He had not stolen it. He had not desired it. He had simply carried it from one address to another. The Hope Diamond sits today in the Janet Annenberg Hooker Hall of Geology, Gems, and Minerals at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. More than 7 million people visit it every year. It sits in a rotating display case, all 45.52 carats of it visible from every angle, blue and brilliant under the lights. Scientists have studied it exhaustively. The Gemological Institute of America has documented its unique characteristics in precise detail, and they found something that no amount of skepticism fully explains away. When the Hope Diamond is exposed to ultraviolet light, it glows. Not the faint fluorescence common to many diamonds. It glows a deep, vivid blood red. And when the UV light is removed, it continues to glow in the dark, pulsing crimson for up to a minute before fading. No other blue diamond on Earth does this. The chemistry is understood. The specific ratio of boron and trace elements in this particular stone creates this particular optical effect. What the chemistry cannot tell you is whether that uniqueness extends beyond the optical. Skeptics have reasonable arguments. The curse, they say, is survivorship bias. We catalog the tragedies and ignore the ordinary outcomes. They note that kings and millionaires live dramatic lives regardless of their jewelry. They note that Pierre Cartier deliberately amplified the legend to justify his asking price. They are probably right about some of it. They cannot explain James Todd. James Todd was not a king. He was not a millionaire. He was not greedy or ambitious or guilty of any violation of any sacred space. He carried a package, and the losses that followed him, his leg, his wife, his home, came anyway. Perhaps the universe is random, and James Todd simply had a very bad year. Or perhaps some objects carry weight that cannot be measured in carats. The Hope Diamond does not answer the question. It simply sits in its case, rotating slowly, blue and patient and ancient, waiting for the next person to get close enough to wonder.